So today I want to go into plot a bit more. I want to go into how to build a plot structure for a mystery story. What I have after last time is now the plot beats spelled out in this form. So what I arrived at is that basically the first 8 plot beats are all about the backstory. So how the infection got started in this world, and then it starts with Alex and the investigation. And basically the idea with the investigation is that he first off starts out with getting the case, then he finds the clothes of the missing people, and that should further the mystery. And then from there he eventually arrives at figuring out that there are other missing people cases. So those other 2 cases that I had originally, they are now part of the mystery. He finds out that they are connected, and from there he eventually is the one who figures out that it's something to do with the water and that the water is somehow contaminated. From there he should start to suspect that the neighboring country is behind it, and that basically the origin of whatever is going on is in the neighboring country, and he tries to have his superiors and so on understand that and basically tells them that, and is shut down there. So this kind of like conspiracy aspect to realizing that in his own organization and in his own government they seem to know something as well and don't want him to further investigate. And then from there he, alongside some of the relatives, end up in the neighboring country trying to figure out what is going on, end up in the infection zone. There they get detained by military that is also in the area there, and then from there they figure out that the people in the neighboring country have also been investigating what is going on and that they're not the origin. Alex and at least one other character make it out from there to the town that has first been within the rumors, kind of like the origin zone, right? From there realize that basically it is this alien threat. So this is where Alex comes across the parasite for the first time, sees the creature, and then the final act is Alex spreading the message in his own world that this parasite exists and what it does by using his own transformation as the proof and the evidence. And that's the final conclusion, where he has basically solved the mystery that is part of his opening story. And today what I want to do is to take this whole overview of what the whole story is and morph it into a way to tell it to the reader in the most satisfying mystery kind of ways. How can you reveal information in a way that makes it a mystery rather than just obvious information? And for this as well, I am again using a technique from Anatomy of Story. I've been using a lot of techniques from here for this entire series so far. And the one that I want to use this time is the reveal of information structure. So I first came across this in a video from Lessons of the Screenplay. I link the video that I'm talking about down below because I really like this video as a really good explanation of how to apply this technique. So if you want to have a look at that, you will find it below. And that's basically what we're doing today. But for this technique today, I'm applying it a bit differently than what it is described at in the book, because I'm basically trying to apply it in a way that fits my current needs. So this is an altered version using some of the information from that technique, but not exactly that technique as it is described in the book. So the first thing that you would want to do if you want to apply it in the same way as I do is know what your full story is, right? So that's what I've been working on last time. And what I also did here is create a summary of all the events that I described before to be able to have it in a telling form so that I can figure out better from a reader perspective what is the crucial information that I want to highlight and tell in different ways. So you need some sort of summary or plot beats just so that you have like this entire overview of what your story is. And then the second step that you would have to apply is figuring out who knows what. So for this technique, what you do is you start out with different perspectives. You have the reader, you have your characters, and with the characters you have to figure out which characters are relevant in terms of reveal of information, because they have different viewpoints and different amounts of knowledge when it comes to what is going on. And then finally you obviously have yourself as the person who knows everything. So the reason why I want to apply this is because I want to be very clear on what the reader knows when the story starts, what the protagonist knows, and how they there are differences in who knows what and how we can play with that different level of knowledge to make it an effective mystery. So the idea is basically to have a sense of who knows what that others don't know, but what you could also do is basically go with listing what these people don't know. So for example, when you start with the readers and you list what they don't know, then you would have all these things like they don't know the world that they're in, they don't know the social norms of that world, they don't know what is going on with this missing people case, they don't know that it's a series, they don't know where the origin is, you know, all these kinds of things, right? So basically you could also go about it in that way if you prefer it. I like it better to do it like this because it's easier and faster to list it in this way. So what does Alex know that others don't know? So since Alex is the protagonist and this is a mystery and we're basically following him through his viewpoint, Alex starts out very much the same as the reader, actually in a bit of a worse position, in the sense that he knows nothing and he's the one who goes from knowing nothing to knowing everything. So that's one of the principles that is described in the reveal of information sequence from Anatomy of Story, is basically that you want the sequence that you're building to be this thing where you start out with knowing nothing and then in the end you know everything. So that's why often in these stories you do have a character as the viewpoint who doesn't know anything either or has very limited information, so that for the reader it is obviously much more interesting to follow a character who reveals all these kinds of things rather than someone who already knew everything from the beginning. And because of that, Alex doesn't really know much either. He knows basically his own family situation, he knows his own backstory and his own motivation. So because I want Alex to be the kind of character that you learn more about throughout the story, through his actions, and also having the interactions with his family to give a sense of who he is and what the pressure is and what the backstory is there and so on. All these things are things that the reader don't know, and they will figure that out as they get to know Alex throughout the story. But Alex obviously himself does know those things and knows what has happened in his past. So that's basically where he's ahead compared to the reader and other characters. By the way, when it comes to names, you can basically see that they are very much kind of like descriptions of what exactly is going on, or just kind of placeholder names. I'm always doing that because I'm not really the kind of person who likes to figure out the actual names of things before I have told the story. So even Alex's name, I've been planning on changing his name once I've got the story written and got more sense of, you know, what I want the world building and so on to be. So most names that you will come across when it comes to my writing process are really just placeholders, exact descriptions or whatever, just so that I can basically recognize again what element that is and then later on change it when I have figured out all the things that I want the story to be. So the next step is to figure out what is the final reveal. So for myself, I obviously have already done that, right? So the final reveal for me is figuring out that it's this alien parasite and where it originally came from. Actually, now thinking about it, I'm kind of wondering if this is my final reveal, because as I have it right now, there's this reveal of learning, okay, this is some sort of creature, right? This is this shock moment where Alex comes across those two people who turn and then sees those creatures. Just from that, Alex obviously doesn't know that it's an alien parasite, he just knows it's a creature. It could be, you know, possession or whatever, right? So, and the reader doesn't know that either. So at this point, we have like part of the answer. So basically the people have gone missing because they've been infected by this thing, and that's how they transformed and so on. And then the final reveal would be through the drifter in this final moment where Alex learns that this parasite came from another world, was brought into his world through the infected tree hunters. With this reveal of this recording, learns that there's this origin zone where it came from, and the drifter is the one who reveals that it's an alien from another world through this portal. And that's the end point. So that's the final reveal, right? And the reason why, obviously, you want to know what is your final reveal and why this is like this end point. What's the answer to the question that you asked in the opening scene? So in my opening scene, it's this mystery of what had happened to those people, which gets revealed when Alex sees the transformation of those people. And then just from that, you would naturally ask, yeah, but what is this creature? What is going on here, right? And then this final part of the answer comes at the last moments, kind of before Alex's story ends. So that's what you want to know, because you want to know what is the overarching question that you want to ask, so that you can then move on to the final step, which is now figuring out how to shape the overall reveal. What we're trying to do now is to figure out all the reveals, all the different kinds of information, and how to shape it in the most interesting way. So to do this, basically the first thing that I want to do now is to highlight all the information that could be used as some sort of reveal, and then link it to the questions that I can ask, right? So the idea would be that, especially in the beginning of the story, there should be a lot of events that happen that further ask more and more questions, so that then at the midpoint we get some answer, and then at the last part of the story it's really more about giving answers to those questions. And there is another principle from this reveal of information sequence, which is that towards the end you want to have the reveals happen more frequently and in larger impact. So in the beginning of the story, in the first part, you do answer some questions, but those are just smaller information that ask new questions, whereas in the end part of the story it's really about giving answers that are really impactful. And then, like I said, for example, the reveal that it's a creature is then followed by it's an alien creature and there are portals, right? That those are the two most crucial informations, and they come very close to each other just before the end of the story. So here is what I mean when I say basically what could be reveals, right? So starting with my summary. So the first thing that I have is basically own notice to the world, a portal between Alex and another world. So I'm going to highlight everything that could be a reveal in yellow, right? So just this first paragraph, for example, right? So this contains a lot of key information that I would only reveal at the very end of the story, right? But for example, a portal between Alex's world and this world opens is information that you wouldn't want to give the reader directly. You would want to have it as a final reveal of what is going on, right? This is what it looks like. This is kind of the information that I want to turn into the driving questions. So driving questions isn't something that was mentioned in the reveal of information structure as such. So it doesn't have that name, but it's basically the same principle. It's your story is driven forward in terms of why the reader sticks around, because they have certain questions that they want answered, and you can use those questions to turn it into the reveal structure that makes it really interesting for the reader to stick around for. So I've got an example of what those driving questions could look like. What I want to do now is take them as the starting point to basically fill in all the questions that I have in regards to this story, and then figure out the order in which I want to ask and then answer them. So those are the types of questions that we could use as a starting point to now shape out the mystery. So this is what it looks like when basically you break it down into questions. It follows the same structure as the plot beats outline did so far, or the summary did. So in the same order, but basically now in question form. And here it's basically the opening question is, where are we and what is going on? And then how did these 50 plus people go missing? Where did they go? Why did they go missing? And also the question of who is Alex and what is his role, and basically kind of like who is this protagonist, right? But that's a sub question in the sense of that's not why the reader would be there or would be sticking around for, because Alex isn't the main element here. It's really the mystery itself. And then from there, deepening the mystery by having those clues of the missing people be found, and then creating those sub-questions of, did they strip down voluntarily or were they forced? Why basically are just the clothes and the possessions there? Did they swim down the river and were collected somewhere? Or why were there no other traces of those people, right? And then from there, breaking it down further and further into questions. So this is basically how you can apply this technique. It's this whole idea of you take your entire story, everything that you know, in the way that I had it, either in a summary form or in plot beat form, whichever is best for you. And then you start to figure out who knows what in the story, what do they know that others don't know, and why are they keeping certain information hidden. These kinds of things you kind of want to figure out who knows what, why do they keep it to themselves, and how can you use that information in the most interesting way to reveal it. So the whole principle basically when it comes to this reveal of information structure is really you want to take the reader from knowing nothing to knowing everything at the end, and you want to not give them free information. You want to give the reader the information then when it comes into play and not beforehand. And make that the rule for all kinds of information. So even for your protagonists, you don't want to give them freely what your protagonist's motivation is, if you could also find an interesting way of having it revealed just as the protagonist is doing something, right? So basically the idea of turning everything in your story into a sort of mystery in itself, so that the reader has a lot of questions, and that is what keeps them there and keeps them engaged in the story, because they're looking for those answers. So what I'm going to do next now is I'm going to integrate the questions that I asked here into this overall outline that I had so far, where basically I want to place them just before the plot beats of where this information is revealed, right? So that I have it within the structure of knowing at what point in the story which question gets answered.